Hi, my name is Mary Claire Stack. I'm an Ursuline of Jesus from Edmonton. Our workshop today is entitled Mind-Filled Decluttering. Very interesting. Our workshop presenter is Mona-Lee Feehan. Mona-Lee is a dear, faith-filled and faithful long-haul friend and is a joy to know. I feel so privileged to introduce her to you. As a wife to Kevin, a mother to 4 wonderful children, and grandmother to 10, Mona-Lee is graced with a beautiful capacity to be fully present to the person or persons with whom she is interacting. This gift of presence is, I believe, the solid foundation on which a life of decluttering can be built. One cannot think of this or that, or frantically being trying to prepare for tomorrow's engagements and still be fully present to the person right here, right now, in front of me. Mona-Lee has learned this, has lived it, and is living it. The quality of her presence says, the more is in this moment of relationship. So I invite us to let the Spirit open up within us a new space as we listen and welcome her among us. Her rich educational background and life experience and her capacity to tell stories will help us to discover how a culture of vocation can be a marvelous tool to speak to the world of the beauty of living life to the full in a profoundly simple, decluttered, and incarnational way.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here, and the title of this presentation is Mind-Filled Decluttering. And when I was first asked to participate in this conference, I thought about my topic and came to a decision on the title. But now, after sitting with it and reworking it and editing it, I found an attraction to a new and revised title. And that's my new and improved title is Mind-Filled Decluttering, bracket, then recluttering it with good stuff. So in this crazy, chaotic world, it's not unusual to feel like your brain is on overload. There's too much to remember. So, I mean, just take a moment to think of all the lists you made for yourself today. And I know you all made them. There's the thoughts related to attending this conference, juggling times, being flexible with meetings, or simply finding a time just to attend. And then there are the work-related thoughts. What is due when? Whom do I have a contact with and connect with? How many emails are waiting for responses? And then what about family or congregational worries and frets? I need to reach out to her. Is he doing better? We need a group to discuss this. But last and certainly not least, all those personal thoughts. How am I feeling today? Did I remember to get my keys? Did I brush my teeth this morning? I didn't get enough sleep last night, so how am I going to function today? How am I going to find time to pray? Think of how long it took me just to go through this very short list and all the things I made you think about. All the things I said you may be thinking of, but you weren't, so you thought you should now. We're faced with this and much more each and every day. It is so prevalent in our lives, these thoughts and emotions, these lists and job requirements, that mental health experts recognize this and have even put a label on it. And they call this mental clutter. So the constant bombardment of thoughts in our brains pushes us closer to burnout, to anxiety, to sleeplessness, or depression. Every day it pushes us to that point. As we age, there's more and more to remember, more and more to do. One of the things I always, just on the side, one of the things I always like to tell my friends is that we get to a certain age and we start to feel like we're forgetting things. And I like to say that each and every day we have so much more to remember, and our library is getting bigger and bigger. When in our 20s, it was the small library on campus, where in our 50s and 60s and 70s, it's a multitude of libraries. And so finding things is a little bit difficult. That's just my aside, that just every day our memories and our thoughts accumulate. And as we age, there's more and more to remember, more and more to do. And whoever said, for those of you that may be thinking of retirement, whoever said retirement was going to slow down didn't anticipate the reality of what is actually occurring. Instead of slowing down, I think that things ramp up as those who have chosen to retire say yes to the multitude of requests on our time, because in our view, retirees have so much time on their hands. Not necessarily true. Everybody is busy. But all of this adds up to the mental clutter, or as I prefer to call it, the mind clutter that we encounter every waking moment. Anything that goes on in the mind is ripe to be clutter. And if you haven't learned how to focus and how to organize it internally, the mental clutter is going to take over. And this definition was penned by Dr. Craig Travis, who's the director of behavioral sciences at the Ohio Medical Center, in Columbus, Ohio. Another label of this mind clutter is something that maybe we're more familiar with calling it, and that's accelerated mental activity or racing thoughts. We've all had racing thoughts. And with today's emphasis on immediacy, instant gratification, and acknowledgement, immediate access to fact finding, it's no wonder that we have so much mind clutter. So our struggle is to focus, to react to acknowledge, and even to ignore or attempt to shelve all the clutter that occurs naturally each and every day, so that we can pause that process of moving towards anxiety disorders, hyperactivity disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. And by the mere fact of trying to address everything that happens in the brains, it leads us towards those named disorders. And the common thread in Travis' explanation is the word disorder. With all the clutter, it's no wonder that we're in a state or close to a state of disorder, or as I like to refer to it, chaos. And all of this is the natural everyday clutter that we all encounter. As spiritual directors, as vocation directors, faith formation leaders, campus ministers, spiritually informed therapists or counselors, we add another dimension to this mind clutter consciously. This dimension is always there, but those involved in these and many other faith-based vocations are conscious of God's presence and our call to serve as Jesus taught us. So, does this add up to mind clutter? As people of faith, we have a deep-rooted sense that thoughts of faith and our God are deeply sacred. And this can lead to a reticence to recognize that even these thoughts can lead to an overabundance of mind clutter. So, have you ever had the experience within a retreat or a day of reflection where your focus is supposed to be on one aspect, but other prayers keep bombarding you? Your sister is ill. A friend just lost a job. A student is struggling with depression. A death in the family has put a strain on an acquaintance's belief in God. We've been trained to acknowledge these thoughts, these prayers. But what we don't recognize is that these thoughts too add to the mental clutter and can push us closer to the chaos, or, as the medical field is apt to label it, disorder. And this disorder, this chaos, is not a comfortable place to be. So, how do we deal with this exhaustive mind clutter? How do we find clutter? How do we find order amongst the clutter? With this disorder being bogged down of all the mental thoughts that happen each and every day. I know the one-word answer to this question is probably very familiar to all of us, but being familiar with the word and understanding how it works, and more specifically, how it works for me as an individual, may be two separate things. And the word, of course, is mindfulness. But what is mindfulness? Or maybe the better question, what is mindfulness to me? And that's what I'd like to focus on for the next section of this presentation. So I have a definition. What is mindfulness? Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, the roots of mindfulness are firmly situated in Eastern meditative faiths. But a more clinical definition is that mindfulness is a quality or state of being conscious or aware of something, a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging your feelings and body sensations. So just let me repeat that again. Mindfulness is a quality or state of being conscious or aware of something, a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly, that might be a word to look at more closely, calmly acknowledging one's feelings, thoughts, and body sensations. So, mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment without judgment or criticism. It's being consciously aware of something. It's being awake to what is around you. And if you think that this is all something just conjured up to fill up more of the self-help bookshelves in the bookstore, mindfulness is actually an evidence-based psychotherapeutic methodology. That is, it has been studied in academic settings. We're finding support, stress reduction, better mental health, and longer lives. So, with it being an academic or theological field of study, then it must require a lot of education to master mindfulness. Well, there's good news for us. To be mindful requires very little training. To be mindful, however, takes commitment and concentration. Everyone has the ability to become mindful. And mindfulness is managing our busyness, everything that happens to us every day. Mindfulness is that part that helps us to manage our busyness. So, if I were to ask you to look around your surroundings right now and see everything that is blue, so give you a moment, you can look around the room, look at everything that is blue in your room. I'm not going to give you a lot of time. So, now I want you to close your eyes and think of all the things in your room that are green. Probably none of us were looking for the green, so we didn't recognize it. Our focus was looking for the blue. The green was there, but we didn't see the green because that was not where our focus was. And the same thing, if you close your eyes and just listen to the sounds in the room. We often do this with our marriage preparation groups. We ask them to close their eyes and hear everything in the room to distinguish between hearing and listening. Because we hear, biologically, we hear so much, but we don't listen to it. Listening is active. It's taking part in what you are hearing. Hearing is biological. So if you closed your eyes and just listened to the sounds in your room, what did you hear in the background? At the beginning of the talk, did you have that same understanding, that same awareness of that sound? Probably not for all of them, because there's been a focus, a choice for a focus. So all these things that you saw, blue and green, all the things that you heard but didn't give recognition to, these are the constants in our world. There's so much going on around us that we take in automatically and we don't pay attention to it. Mindfulness is not noting the colors and hearing the background noise. Mindfulness is the focus. What do you want to focus on? Whatever you want to focus on will bring a new awareness to your mind. And that's the outcome of being mindful, becoming aware of that which we take for granted. So, um, we're all storytellers, and I mentioned that that's we learn by stories, and one of the ways that I teach, one of the ways that I express what's happening in my life is usually through stories. So, I have a few stories that I will be sharing with you, and this is one of my stories. Um, Early in the 1900s, maybe not 1900s, maybe the 1990s. I was skiing and I had a fall on the hill and I dislocated both my shoulders. And I had no use of my arms for 6 weeks as they were taped to my side. So I need a lot of care. I needed a lot of people to take care of me for that 6 weeks until I could use my arms again. And it was in through this accident that I understood and learned more about family caring, about giving over, and lamenting the things that I could not do that I hated to do before the accident. Without understanding, I believe this is when I first started to practice mindfulness. Instead of sitting in my chair, which I sat in for a very long time, instead of just sitting in that chair and just being, I became more aware of my surroundings and the mundane things that before this accident I took for granted. And this incident in my life was a preparation for something even more significant that was to come later. 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And because of my accident, I was better prepared to recognize what was happening in my life. I already learned to give over my care just a little bit with the accident. And this helped me to give over more graciously during my treatments. And I recognized that each day was a gift from God as daily I recovered. And this was instrumental for me in being more aware and how precious each day is. What a gift from God it is to wake up each and every day, to wake up, put your feet on the floor, and say, "Thank you, God, for another day." So I became more mindful of my surroundings. I was looking up at the sky. I know the clouds are there, but when I started to focus, the beauty of the clouds overtook my thoughts. I cherished my time with my children way more, and time with my husband became more precious. And I consciously thought about what I was going to do that day to smile. What was I going to do that day to make someone else smile? My daughter has a separate routine that she does every night with her children. After they've said grace and they start to eat, they go around the table and everybody says one thing that they were happy about that day, something that happened to them that made them happy. And then after that, they go around the table again and say, "What's one thing that you did to make someone else smile?" And when you have that kind of focus, all that brain stuff that's happening, that anxiety, that stress seems less important. Because when we become more mindful, we recognize that we can be a more mindful person, that we can take over all these thoughts, that the thoughts don't have to take over us. So, the key part of all of this is in the words focus and choice. Where is our focus when we experience brain overload? What is it we choose to focus on when our thoughts are jumbled, chaotic, and maybe plentiful? And conscious or not, we do have a choice. Being mindful of that choice is crucial in helping to focus on what is right in front of us rather than searching through the obscure, or our inclination to overanalyze, or our penchant to hierarchicalize. I'm not sure if that's a word, but I've made it up now. It's going to be in the dictionary next year. But our penchant to hierarchicalize our thoughts So this is important, this is less important. This is more important than this, which is less important than this. So we have this tendency of um, putting things in order rather than dealing with what's right in front of us and the thoughts that are right front center in our brain. So how can I practice mindfulness in my life? Uh, I have something I call the 7 principles of living a more mindful life, or how to declutter my mind and reclutter it with good stuff. So, why 7? Because I think 7 is an important number. 7 days of creation, there's 7 sacraments in my Catholic Church, and Jesus had 7 apostles that I can name. I can't remember the names of the other folks. There's 7 children in my family and in Kevin's family. And if you buy 1 donut and then a half a dozen more, you have 7. And if you buy a case of beer and share 5 of them, you have 7 left. I think you kind of get the picture here. I just chose 7 just because. So I just want to go through these things that I feel in my mind and through my experience helps us to declutter and then focus on the good recluttering. So, first of all, we need to declutter. And I'm sure that everybody has done this or has suggested it or has worked with it, but it's important. It's an important first step that we need to remember all the time. And that is breathe. Just breathe. When our brains are on overload, especially when they're just compounding and getting more and more and beating like on the sides of our skull, and everything is happening and we don't know what to think about, even when our brains are on that overload and things become chaotic, attempting to focus is a challenge. So when this happens, our challenge is to find a quiet space for ourselves. We tell this to other people, but we don't often do it ourselves. We have to find a quiet space. We have to find a quiet space where we can close our eyes and fill our lungs to capacity with a big breath in. Just I hope you did it at the same time. What a difference that makes as I'm sitting here with the anxiety of doing a presentation. But what a difference that breath, focusing on that breath, what it does to what's happening in my mind, my heart, and my soul. So we need to find a space, a quiet space where we can close our eyes and think about holding your breath to the count of 5. And if that's too much, to the count of 3. And then blow your breath out slowly again to that same count. And as you blow out, imitate blowing the candle out as you exhale slowly. So this concentration on counting as you breathe in, holding it, counting as you breathe out, helps to slow so much down in our brains and helps to declutter. So in this step, we're choosing to focus on our breathing and nothing else. And if this helps you, then we know we can be mindful. We know we can do this. So repeating this breath sequence for 5 or 6 breaths slows the brain and releases some of the stress that's on our brain. One thing that's always been a part of my breathing exercise was a gift from my dad. My dad always used to say, breathe out ego and breathe in God. And while sometimes I'm not always focused on breathing out ego as much as I should, the breathing in God has always been something that calms me and reminds me I am never alone in this. Breathing in God just fills my whole spirit, slows everything down. And it's one of those thoughts that really helps me on sleepless nights, that really helps me when I've been faced with something very challenging at work. It just reminds me, this simple act of breathing, slowing my mind down and being reminded that God walks with me is exactly what I need. And that's my main way of decluttering. The other thing is slow down. See what's right in front of you right now. What is it that you truly enjoy? Focus on that thought. Choose your thoughts and focus on the ones you choose. It's okay, though, to be enormously unsuccessful at this, because we often are unsuccessful at decluttering our brains. But we need to keep in mind that the next choice is ours. We can choose to fall into the depths of failure, or we can choose to try again and again and again to slow down our brain and choose what it is that we want to think about, to focus on. And it gives that sense of rest, that sense of taking a breath, that sense of, ah. Because remember, even God rested on the seventh day. So I think it's important for us too. So we've done a little bit of decluttering. Now, how can we reclutter with things that are much healthier for our brain? Well, the first one, which I think is number 2 in my list of 7, find the joy. We've been given so much, yet we give little recognition to joy, pure joy. I had a student who once was in my class, who once came into my class, and we were talking about the way our faith can help us to see ourselves, to recognize beauty in the world. And this young woman said, joy is God's miracle gift to us. I thought that is so brilliant. Joy is God's miracle gift to us, and it's to be found in all He created. We can find joy everywhere. Joy is right in front of us, but because of all the things that we have in our minds, we don't focus on it, and therefore we don't see it. Joy is God's miracle gift to us, to be found in all He has created. So look for the joys amidst the chaos. Look for the happiness. Look for the smiles. Look for those things that God has promised. The joy of being one with our God. And choose to put your focus on those kind of miracles. So the next section, number 3 on my list here, it leads right into what I was just talking about. When I'm talking about joy and finding a smile, you need to find your smile and have more laughter and spread more smiles and spread more laughter. That is such a gift in our life. So I have another little story for you. A couple is celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary in a quiet, romantic little restaurant. Suddenly, a tiny yet beautiful fairy appears on their table. And she says, for being such an exemplary married couple and for being loving to each other all this time, I am going to grant you each one wish. And the wife thinks about it very succinctly. And she said, oh, I want to travel around the world with my darling husband. And the fairy waves her magic wand and poof, 2 tickets for the Queen Mary 2 appeared in her hands. The husband thought for a moment, little moment and another moment. And then he said, well, this is all very romantic, but an opportunity like this will never come again. So I'm sorry, love, but my wish is to have a wife 30 years younger than me. Well, the wife and the fairy were deeply disappointed, but a wish is a wish. So the fairy waved her wand and poof, the husband became a 92-year-old man. A smile. And the moral of the story, Men should remember that most fairies are females. You know, we need to learn to laugh more and laugh often. It's so good for our souls, and it's critical within all of our relationships. When was the last time that you had a good belly laugh? And do you remember how you felt? And was your brain cluttered at that time? It felt good. What made you smile yesterday? Do you remember? When we're mindful of our smiles and our laughter, we have the opportunity to be a more smiley and jovial person. And you can feel your smile through your whole body. And I don't often think about it, but sometimes I have these very strange thoughts in my head. But, I often thought, what would have been like to hear Jesus laugh? He was fully man. And like any man, he was a boy before that. And like any boy, he had to listen to all the dad jokes that St. Joseph probably told him in his youth. You know, find your smile. Um, One of my daughter-in-laws, we've had many family portraits done in the last many years. And she is such a beautiful woman, and I love her so dearly. But she has a picture smile. In all of the pictures, she has this beautiful smile that doesn't reach her eyes. And we joke about it all the time. This is not something that I'm saying behind her back, but she obviously has this picture smile. And that's not the smile that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the smile that fills your body with what we talked about before, with joy. Laughter is important. It's fun. It's light. It's what we need each and every day. So on to the next one. We need to live a life that's filled with gratitude. And again, I have a story that I'd like to tell you. I read this story in, funny enough, the Chicken Soup for the Soul, and it really touched me. And it was a story about a family. They had a young girl who was 8 years old and a boy who was 4. The daughter was very ill, and she needed a transfusion, and she needed bone marrow. Um, they did all the tests of all the family members, and the only one that matched her perfectly was her little brother, her 4-year-old brother. So mom and dad wanted to make sure that little brother knew what was happening and had some say in the decision whether he wanted to help his sister. And they sat down and they talked to him in the best way that thought possible, that he could understand it in his 4-year-old brain. And at the end of it, they asked, "What do you think?" And the little boy said, "I want to do it." So the day comes closer, and the day of, they're in beds beside each other in the hospital. And the doctor is explaining everything to the little boy as this procedure is going on, so he understands, and to the little girl, so she understands. And the doctor gets to the point where he says, "Okay, now we're going to take what we need from you and give it to your sister. If you have any questions, just put your hand up." And the young boy puts his hand up. And the doctor says, "What's your question?" And the little boy looks at him and says, "When do I start to die?" Amazing. In his mind, his little 4-year-old brain, he thought that in order to help his sister, he had to give his life. I'd like to think that I would do that for my sister, but I'm not sure what would happen when it actually happened. And this little boy gave such an immense gift to the whole family. And this story is about the little boy and what happens. But let's look at the story from the perspective of the big sister. Her life changed significantly because of her little brother. Her life was saved because of her little brother. And imagine yourself in that position. Imagine how grateful you could feel. We have so much to be grateful for. And each day, if we take the time, our grateful list will grow exponentially. So we need to be mindful of our gratitude. And this kind of mindfulness, it's okay to take over my brain anytime, to live that space of gratitude. So the next is build relationships through happiness and love each day. So one day, I was babysitting my eldest granddaughter, who was 5 at the time. She's now 14, going on 23. As we were talking, she looked at me and she said, "I love you, Emmy." Emmy is what my grandchildren call me. She said, "I love you, Emmy." And that in itself made me melt. But then she went on to explain how loving someone works. And she said, "First, I take the love from here and I bring it up through here, and then I blow it into the air, and I never know where it's going to land." And this is from a 5-year-old. I was schooled on love by a beautiful little 5-year-old. The hug that she got from me, she knew she had given me something special. She may not have known exactly what she gave, but her smile told me that she felt wonderful about what she had said to me and how that made her feel, how that made me feel. Because our relationship cemented through that story. And I often tell this story when I'm speaking of passion. But what greater way to live mindfully than to breathe in those moments of aha each and every day and to feel that depth of love? It's fulfilling. It's putting good clutter into our brain. And if you try every day to live a moment, to relive, to rethink a moment of aha, imagine what that will do for us and our cluttered brains. So the next is be compassionate. But what is compassionate? Compassion is putting yourself in the shoes of others and seeing the perspective from the eyes of the other. It's thinking of the other before ourselves. And being compassionate can declutter our minds of so many insignificant, busy things. We have room for this rewarding and productive way of thinking. We have room when we are compassionate. We have room in our brain for that all the time. And again, another story. My grandson Kellen, whenever we've babysat any of our grandchildren, at about 3 months, they reach this stage that when mom and dad go, there's nothing you can do to stop them from crying. This is what happened with Kellen. He was about 3 months old. We were looking after him and his sister, and he cried and cried and cried, and nothing we could do would calm him down. And when I consciously thought, when I went into my brain and I started to consciously think about what this must feel like from his point of view, the stress that I felt was diminished greatly. And I worked more on trying to relieve his stress than on mine. And I accomplished that, or at least I think I accomplished that, by taking off his sleeper and slowly running my hands up and down his arms, his legs, and his tummy, and back and forth. And I was working to console him rather than trying to make him stop crying or to soothe him through my own stress. Now, he didn't stop crying altogether, but the anxiety in his cry was gone, and he began to slow down. This is so critical for us to see the other and try to put ourselves in their space. And when we try to do that, it lessens what's happening in our brain. It lessens or makes that which is right in front of us most important. And at that time, that was my little baby grandson. And by the way, this is also a bit to explain how important touch is, because touch is powerful. I will add an addendum here about touch, but when we are fully aware, when we use all of our senses, we use everything that we have: touch, hearing, seeing, smell, taste. We're incorporating all of this into our moment of compassion, our moment of joy, our moment of laughter, and it becomes much richer. I heard the anxiety in my grandson's voice. I could see the stress on his body, on his face. I felt the softness of his skin. I smelled that beautiful baby scent each time I softly kissed him. And each kiss was filled with the favor of love and compassion. And all of this was surrounded by that touch. So compassion, when we put ourselves in place of the other person, we forget a lot of what's happening in our own brains that brings us to a place of chaos and helps us to be in a place of importance, other focused. The next point is more of a do thing for us, understanding our physicality. The physicality of a mindful life is better through nature, by getting more sleep, by eating well, by exercising. We often let some of these things go to the wayside because there's so many other important things to do in our life. But we need to make time for them. We need to take care of ourselves. Love God and love one another as you love yourself. The two most beautiful rules given to us by Christ. And in order to love the other, we need to love ourselves and take that time, make that time to eat properly, get sleep, exercise, recognize nature. I still have trouble with this one, but every day, every weekday morning, I go for a run on my treadmill, and I do try to get to bed early, but I'm not a morning person. So if I can, I will sleep in. But I often lay awake at night, not able to fall asleep. And this is the perfect time for me to work on decluttering my mind, letting go of the busy mess or the busyness, either way, of today. Letting go of the things that I was supposed to do today, letting go of the hurts that occurred, letting go of myself. So it's that whole sense of let go and let God. And when I'm really open to that, my mind will slow down and I have a great chat with God. And that helps me to sleep. Not all the time, because sometimes God and I get into such a great conversation that it's a few minutes or half hour maybe. But it hits my heart and my soul. And I do struggle to eat well. I know that that's something we all do. But I am trying to be mindful of what I'm preparing, what I'm buying in the grocery store, what's in my pantry, what I order at restaurants. And when I'm mindful of all of this, I am more likely to eat well. When I don't think about it, I'm pretty content to have fast food and the odd Coke float. Excuse me, I do like Coke floats. But a key to this is don't punish yourself. Just be mindful. Think about what you're putting in your body and how you feel after eating or drinking something that is healthy for you. So then the last point I have, number 7, is what I just said. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself and forgive others. We're so hard on ourselves. So how many of you have had evaluations of your work or presentations or classes done? And we can have a 98% of the respondents reacting positively. You did a great job. But do we think of them? No. We think about that 2% that we're not engaged. Those are the ones that we put our focus on. We need to be softer with ourselves. We need to forgive ourselves when we misstep. Life is a do-over. And when we hold ourselves as we would hold our loved ones, as we are held by our God, the do-over is much more enriching. Forgive others. Give them excuses in your own brain. You can say almost anything you choose about someone. And if you end your thought with, God bless them, everything is softened. And my goodness, did you see what Louise was wearing to work today? God bless her. Kind of softens everything. We put God in the picture. Not a good example. But when we bring ourselves to a point where we can forgive ourselves for our missteps, when we can forgive others, we become more mindful again of the good things, of the good clutter, of the kind that is God-filled rather than world-filled. So in closing, I just want to give a few little hints that I have that have worked for me. The first one, I think, is difficult to do, but it's one that I think we all need to focus on a little bit more. We need to learn to embrace our busyness because we are busy people. And we need to embrace this busyness in a positive way. We can embrace it, or we can let it become a burden and another clutterer of our brain. If we choose to embrace the goodness of this busyness, we can often find the good to celebrate the busyness instead of it being a great burden to bear. My husband and I are very busy people, and it's quite easy to wallow in that for whatever reason. You know, anything can spark that wallow because we are so busy. We're so busy, which makes us so tired, which makes us no time to enjoy each other. Or we can embrace that busyness and say, wow, what a speedy week this was. Everything that we had to do, guess what? We did all of it. And I'm still smiling and I'm here with you. You know, and in that same sense of busyness, we need to embrace the hindsight and then embrace hindsight as a gift. It's the gift that allows us to see the goodness in our lives. It allows us to see the miracles that God has put in our way. It allows us to see those moments of aha that made sense there, but today feeds our decluttering. But most important of all the hints, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself when you forget. Forgive yourself when you forget or believe you don't have enough time to be mindful or to eat properly or to get more sleep. Don't be hard on yourself. God is not hard on us, and we follow that lead. We need to find that place in ourselves that just accepts today was not the best and move on. And maybe try later in the day with that do-over button. But if it doesn't happen, move on. Give yourself a pat on the back for remembering that you forgot to be mindful or that you had too much to do. But just make the decision to do it tomorrow. Don't be hard on yourselves. So, in conclusion, I wish for all of you, all of us, success in practicing mindfulness in our everyday life, in decluttering the stuff that doesn't matter and cluttering it with the stuff that matters, the stuff that makes life livable, enjoyable, happy, deliriously happy. It's a sense of embracing our chaos. And I like to call our lives in our family holy chaos. They are WHOLLY, holy chaotic. But there's a beauty and a grace that God has given us that makes it holy chaos. H-O-L-Y. So be conscious of everything that you think, you feel, and say for a short while each day. And it's amazing how you can build up your mindfulness and you become more aware of yourself and your surroundings, and it becomes more natural. And I want to leave you with one thought. You take the love from here, and it comes all the way up through here, and then you blow it, and you never know where it's going to land. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Ever since you said, yes, I would like to do that workshop, the excitement in me has grown. What we received today has far exceeded my hopes and expectations. Mona-Lee, I believe your invitation to declutter is a prophetic word for each of us participating in this conference, whether as a single person, married couple, diocesan priest, or consecrated woman or man. It is also a prophetic voice for our Western world as we attempt to witness to the joy of the gospel, the love and care of Mother Earth, and our call to live in sisterly and brotherly communion with all, open, present to the now in all its fullness, its God moment.